Good afternoon, everyone. Happy Friday, and welcome to our second webinar of 2020. We are the Florida chapter of Telehealth and Medicine Today Journal. Our mission is to educate the healthcare industry and the public on the value of telehealth and telemedicine by promoting the publication of scholarly articles. My name is Tony Elholmes, the founder and CEO of Alpha Coding Experts, a national healthcare consulting firm specializing in telehealth coding, compliance, and reimbursement. It is my privilege to introduce my co-chair, Dean Turner. Dean is the founder and CEO of Virtual Physical Therapists, the nation's leading telerehabilitation provider. Prior to this, Dean spent over 25 years as a physical therapist, published researcher, speaker, college lecturer, and owner of a busy outpatient clinic. With her background in clinical excellence, Dean saw a need to transform the current path of musculoskeletal care by changing the focus from the treatment to a proper mechanical diagnosis. Virtual Physical Therapists is focused on the triple aim: better care with improved outcomes at a lower cost. This is done by enabling convenient access to the best specialist anytime, anywhere. Our topic for today is going to focus on telehealth parity laws. Without further ado, here is our telehealth pioneer and expert, Dean Turner.
Well, thank you, Tony, for that great introduction. And today's topic is parity. So what exactly is parity? This is a law requiring telehealth services to be reimbursed at the same rate as an in-person service. There are also two subdivisions to parity: telehealth coverage and payment. So they're a little bit separate. Currently, 42 states and DC have some sort of telehealth commercial insurance coverage law. And several other states have bills currently under development, so fingers crossed for them. These laws are also referred to as telehealth commercial payer statutes, since they deal with the commercial insurers, not Medicare and Medicaid. Because of the shortness of my time, I'm not going to expand on coverage for asynchronous and remote patient monitoring. But before I even continue, I want to actually give a shout out to Nate Lachman of Foley and Launder. His team has put out some great articles explaining the rules and regulations in layman's terms, and that's where I went for most of my research. He is one of the most influential attorneys, and I have used him for numerous occasions in the past. So we're going to start off with telehealth commercial payer statute. This is the base law. It typically requires healthcare plans to cover services provided via telehealth the same as if that service was in person. All but 8 states have a statute regarding this. The 8 states that do not have any law or wording on telehealth coverage are Pennsylvania, West Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, Alabama, Wyoming, and Idaho. Now, what is this, the coverage provision or parity? This law discusses or requires a commercial insurance to cover telehealth if the insurer would cover the same service if it was provided in person. As we noted before, the majority of states, 42 plus DC, have this provision. The 8 states in white are not applicable since they do not have any law addressing telehealth. And then those additional 8 states have limited coverage, and they include Washington, Utah, Arizona, Alaska, Oklahoma, Illinois, Michigan, Maryland. Florida and Massachusetts have no coverage provision whatsoever. So that was coverage. Now this is the other subdivision, reimbursement. So telehealth coverage has been widely expanded, but the same is not true of reimbursement or payment parity. This is a law that specifically includes language addressing payment or reimbursement rates for telehealth services. Most states do not, as you can see, but those, as you can see by the ones in orange, and if you add the white ones in, they're the states that have no law whatsoever regarding telehealth. Currently, 15 states maintain laws expressing or specifically addressing reimbursement of telehealth, but only 10 offer true payment parity. So that means that if you're a provider outside of those 10 states, it's going to be an uphill battle getting reimbursement for the same as an in-service consultation. The states with true payment parity are Arkansas, Delaware, Georgia, Hawaii, Kentucky, Minnesota, New Mexico, Utah, and Virginia. Now, there's a lot of variances between each states. For example, if there will be the same amount of payment, or if there's a ceiling or floor to that payment, or even how the instructions on how the parties must negotiate rates. So you have to check each individual state for their specific regulations. Unrestricted originating sites. This is important. And it means, does the state impose restrictions on where the patient is located? Some states still require the patient to be located in a particular clinical setting at the time of the telehealth consult. Most states are unrestricted and seen in blue, but there are 5 states with restrictions, and they are Florida, Tennessee, Illinois, Arizona, and Washington. Now, this is the law. I think it's the one law that really irks me, because the lawmakers are totally missing the whole point of telehealth and even the evolution of medicine, and that is the patient comes first. The only reason I started my telehealth company was because a previous patient made me do it. He was stuck in bed with excruciating back pain and begged for us to FaceTime him. This was 5 years ago, and I actually told him to go to the ER if his wife could get him there. But he was adamant and refused, because when he went to the ER 3 years prior, it led to 2 failed back surgeries until he found our clinic. So he was able to get me out of my comfort zone, and I reluctantly FaceTimed him. 5 days later, he was 85% better and back to work. Now, he was not in a rural area or in one of those originating site restrictions, or a state that had that. So again, telehealth should be open to all, no matter where they're located. And that's very important, because people in cities have difficulty getting services because of the commute times as well. Member cost shifting protections. This means this is state law prohibit a commercial insurer from charging a patient their deductible co-insurance or co-payment for telehealth greater than they would be charged for an in-person service. As you can see, this is split down the middle in the country. You have about half blue. That means they do have protection. And the other half is orange, white, with no law protecting an increase in co-insurance or deductible. This next one has to do with providers. Provisions for narrow, exclusive, or in-network provider limits. So we want to know, if does the state law have language addressing whether or not a health plan may limit the coverage or the reimbursement for telehealth to only those providers that are within the plan's narrow telehealth network, exclusive network contract, or payment provisions for the in-network versus out-of-network providers. Only 15 states and DC address this. So remember, all states have variances. We need to check each specific ruling. For laws are complicated and change frequently. It's hard to keep up with the changing of these rules, not only for us, but also for insurers. Just recently in the news, you might have seen that Blue Cross Blue Shield of North Dakota was fined $125,000 for violating telehealth service coverage and claims. They were not reimbursing for certain virtual care services. So every state is different. So there's a lot of confusion, not only for us, but for the carriers as well. You may need to fight to get properly reimbursed. So now I'm actually going to pass it over to Tony, who will give you some real world insights.
That was fantastic, Adine. I know those parity laws are just so state specific. So real world insights is always a fun thing to discuss because, as we all know, taking the technical and legal and making it practical doesn't always jive perfectly. I think this image just perfectly paints the picture of the uphill battle that you have specifically with telehealth and telemedicine. So, as Adine mentioned in our January seminar, even if you go above and beyond, you dot all your I's and you cross your T's, somehow, some way, other challenges and obstacles seem to come along. And you've got to be in it for the long haul. This is a fight, it's an uphill battle. And I've seen this happen so many times with parity laws. So, to share a specific example with you, we worked with a large integrated health network out in Texas. Texas has a telehealth parity law, and that law has been around since 1997. So this is not a new thing. Well, the law requires telehealth coverage from private insurance companies, state health plans, and Medicaid. And it requires them to reimburse in the same way as in-person services. Well, Texas law does not state the specific eligible providers that can be reimbursed for telehealth and telemedicine services. So this is where it gets really complicated. But Texas Medicaid happens to be the only payer that does give a list of eligible providers. So if the state law doesn't specifically mention the specific eligible providers, insurance companies often use this as the first line of defense for not paying for telehealth services. So this is their go-to denial, and so many different clients that I've worked with have had to go back to the state laws and the legislature to get that specific language. So this was the case with this particular client out in Texas. They identified, after several years of not receiving payment for their telehealth services provided by many different types of providers, from mental health, physical therapists, occupational therapists, you name it. There was such a long list. Only Texas Medicaid would pay them for their telehealth services. Well, this was a tough pill to swallow because the organization had invested millions of dollars in starting the program, educating, training their staff, putting the technology in place. It was so hard for them to get past this, finding out that they were only going to recoup about 10% of the amount of services they had provided to their patients. And this was devastating. And that list of Medicaid eligible providers in Texas happens to be very, very short. So this is the value of having a really great expert guide you through some of these hurdles before they happen. It's always better to be proactive than reactive. And even when you are proactive, especially as Adine has mentioned to you, there's still challenges and there's still a lot of hurdles that you're going to have to overcome. So this particular instance is one that I share with you because I hope that if you're considering doing telehealth or telemedicine, you become very familiar, intimately familiar with your state laws about what they cover as far as parity and then eligible providers, and then get so specific into the individual private insurance companies. State Medicaid plans tend to be very friendly to telehealth and telemedicine. And I think that this is going to continue to evolve, but maybe not at a pace that we would like it to be as fast. And so we're going to be hosting monthly educational seminars on all things related to telehealth and telemedicine. The next one will be on March 20th at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So same time, and then it will be recorded if you're not able to make that date and time. This will take place via Zoom and pre-registration is required. Our topic for the event is going to discuss the essentials before starting your own telemedicine company. And Aideen, I'm sure, is going to be able to share some invaluable insight with you. So we're putting up a poll question now because we want to know specifically where our audience is in their journey with telehealth and telemedicine. What level are you at? Are you just exploring? Are you about to launch? Are you already treating patients and maybe you're seeing one patient a month or 25 or more patients? Or maybe this doesn't apply to you. But if you could tell us where you're at in the telehealth and telemedicine journey, that will greatly help us tailor our topics to meet your specific needs. So please subscribe to the TMT Journal. It's completely free to our listeners, and it's a wealth of information about telehealth and telemedicine. If you are a provider of telemedicine or telehealth and are interested in sharing your outcomes, please submit your manuscript to the TMT Journal. We want to spread the word about the great work you're doing and ultimately expand telehealth and telemedicine in the United States as well as the world. And make sure to connect and follow with myself and Aideen on LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. We really appreciate your time today. Thank you for joining us. A recording of today's presentation will be available on all of our social media groups and on YouTube. We hope to see you next month on March 20th. Thank you for your time today and have a wonderful weekend.